Hello, everybody. My name's Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Dynamics 365 MVP, and I'm hosting this panel for BluJay Solutions and MMB Solutions. And our subject today is how technology can help companies that ship, survive, and thrive in these unprecedented times. Very interesting topic. So why don't we meet our panel experts, and we'll have them introduce themselves. So let's start off with Michelle.
I'm Michelle Frenier. I'm Director of Solutions Consulting here at BluJay. I have over 18 years industry experience in international trade and supply chain. I'm also a licensed customs broker and a certified U.S. export compliance officer.
Great. Chris Winstanley.
Hi, I'm Chris Winstanley. I'm a supply Director of Solution Consulting at BluJay, same team as Michelle. I've been with the company for a number of years, working in various different roles, and I kind of, as you probably tell from my accent, work out of the UK office.
Okay, Steve Williamson.
Hello, everybody. It's Steve Williamson, Director of Solution Consulting, and work in the supply chain, more focused on our transportation solutions for the last couple decades.
Okay, thank you. And Jason Chung.
Hello, my name is Jason Chung. I'm Director of Technical Services with NMB Solutions. So I take care of all of the architectural design, all of the development work, and make sure the solutions meet the business needs.
Okay, so those are our supply chain experts. So let's start to dig in. 2020 was a very interesting year for the supply chain. Let's talk about, what the smart customers had in place. And what happened to those customers that didn't have anything in place that really got caught behind the 8 ball? Chris, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Rick, really. So, I mean, I might flip it on its head slightly, I suppose, and go, well, kind of why were companies caught behind the 8 ball? Why did they struggle? And I think what 2020 really did, in terms of everything that was happening from a socio-economic perspective, from a political perspective, from the pandemic clearly perspective, was really highlight a certain number of things and bring into kind of stark reality kind of what kind of exposed issues in businesses' supply chains. In some ways, there was things that companies just couldn't possibly have foreseen or reacted to. I mean, I think an example of that would be the shortage of containers all around the world, for example. But in other ways, it really just kind of highlighted things that probably they were aware of in their business that needed to change and needed to evolve, but they just weren't at that point. And the speed and the things happened in 2020, and say really brought that to the fore. And I think if you kind of look back at what kind of things where businesses struggled, it's through rigidity. So they had a supply chain that was kind of, if you call it rigid, I mean, in terms of from a technological perspective. And it's a common story, really. Why haven't they put themselves in a position to be successful? And it's because often they have old systems, siloed systems. They have multiple systems to do kind of different types of role in the business. And as a result of that, they then lack that ability to integrate to different third parties, different partners, and they see that, and those are the kind of the 2 biggest frustrations that they were seeing, but then because of that, equally couldn't react to the kind of what was going on around them. On the flip side, if you think of those that were successful, or maybe successful is probably relative, isn't it, in 2020? Some of that successful might for some businesses just be survival, let's be honest here. And some of that is being able to have that level of flexibility where they could secure supplier stock, with their supply chain inbound, for example, in order to fulfill their customer demand. And the other thing was being able to react to the changes in demand, whether that was different types of products, kind of the toilet paper joker that just goes around and around. If that was something you could supply, then you were in good shape, weren't you? But then equally, there's other things kind of happening in the background as well. So things like social media and social media influencers having an influence on customer demand. Green initiatives, kind of really big thing across the world. Again, something else that's happening in the background that's having a change. Customer demand is evolving and changing, and businesses are in a position to respond to that from a technical perspective. Onboard suppliers quickly, change product ranges quickly, offer a greater range of products through a different set of channels quickly. Were the ones that really kind of, again, relatively speaking, were able to come out of 2020 with a degree of success.
So I have to ask you, why was there a shortage of containers?
So there is an ongoing shortage of containers in the world today because of the COVID situation and kind of everything came to a sudden stop. All the containers were in certain places, primarily. So the containers are stacked up in China, for example, and containers are they're also stacked up in certain parts of the US, and they just weren't moving around sufficiently to enable that demand to go and the trading of containers, if you like, to happen. So now, if you were to do some research, certainly there's stories over here in the UK of companies being quoted where potentially they used to pay maybe $1,000 per container, now having to pay over $10,000 per container, purely to bring exactly the same product into the country. And depending on depending on what you're making or what you're manufacturing, it doesn't matter, I don't think. If you're taking that much of a hit on every container, it's very difficult to make your business sustainable. So there's a series of factors which effectively meant that there's no less containers in the world. They're all just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And restrictions in movement have made it very difficult to kind of get them back to where they were.
So we're really seeing sort of that domino effect on the supply chain.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jason Chung, let's talk a little bit some more about, what the successful customers had in place and, the other customers that didn't fare so well, what happened to them?
Well, there's a lot to do as well with cloud computing. So cloud computing is quite a big thing. It's more and more utilized in the business world, and so the ability to scale up and down your operations based on what your needs are is really important in this competitive world, right? And so we've seen a lot of that. We've seen even in the cloud computing space, there's been such a high demand where some regions don't even become available. So you have to kind of look at other data centers to do your cloud computing. But if you don't have that ability to switch regions around and move your virtual hardware around, that is something that is limiting as well.
Okay, great. Over to Steve.
I'm a term guy, so I always throw out a couple terms that I look at, and these terms would affect the guys that did well and the guys that maybe didn't do well, and that's flexibility and understanding. So do you understand your supply chain, and do you have flexibility in your supply chain? And if you're on either areas of that, and you had the toilet paper situation that Chris brought up earlier, where you could add and grow to support that demand, then you were making out great. Conversely, if you didn't have that flexibility of understanding, you didn't make out so great. So when you look at some of the businesses that the political and the COVID related environments, some businesses did extremely well, but some that could have done well didn't do as well as they could. So you would almost still put them in that other category of, so to speak, not making out or struggling through COVID. And Chris alluded to a little bit of this. And it goes to kind of Jason's point about cloud computing of, ultimately, can you expand as needed to support that, and then constrict, because you don't want to necessarily be paying for, a peak versus you don't want to be necessarily paying for that valley. You kind of want to be able to be in that middle. And if you've got that understanding and the flexibility in your technology stacks, then it gives you that, I think, a little bit of advantage, even if you're in a market like bicycles did great over the 2020, right? Bicycle manufacturers and suppliers and accessories around that. So if you could support that, hey, all of a sudden I have to ship internationally. How do I do that? If you're that, how do I do that guy versus, oh, I've got that. Just put the label on documents and off you go. Then I'm fulfilling those orders and I'm taking advantage of that expansion. So
what you're saying, if you're a bicycle manufacturer, but your systems are 25 years old, you cannot pivot in time to take advantage.
That's just it, right? And the speed is what you need, is really to be able to react to that speed for sure.
Great. Okay, over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, so I'd like to take a minute to talk about e-com. So that was a huge area of discussion in the last year, not only internationally, because in the US, international e-com orders under $800 can pass free through customs. So we've been seeing a huge uptick in companies taking advantage of e-commerce from that perspective. But just domestically here in the US, I'm sure anyone who had anything in the supply chain around the holiday time realized how congested and how quickly even the US Postal Service went to a screeching halt. At least here on the East Coast where I live, they had not containers, but tractor trailer trucks full of packages just sitting for over a month sometimes. And these are priority packages people paid a lot of money for. So if you think about those who were in the e-com business, and if you're purchasing as an individual user, you usually have choices on how to ship it, right? You're going to go with what's the most economical. You're buying something individually. Those folks that only had one way to ship to keep the cost down and relied heavily on US Post really came to a hard place and fast, because customers were expecting to get their goods. They were stuck for way longer than they were supposed to. And lots of people were like, I don't want this, I'm going to return it. And companies keep a pretty good return policy because they want people to buy again. And I know I had plenty of things that were not moving. So those companies who had a more flexible way to pivot and look at different ways to ship economically, specifically to those high demands, everyone was shopping online. You couldn't get anything delivered in 2 days from Amazon, at least I couldn't. So people were looking for different ways. And when they saw, oh, the post, if I ship by X day, I'm guaranteed to get this for the holidays. Well, what I think might have happened there is X day came and the US Post Service had no idea what to do with the size of the volume that they actually got out of that. So it just backed up and backed up. So I think one of the ways we need to learn, and supply chains need to learn, is that successful people don't rely on only one inexpensive mode to ship to their customers. If they saw that congestion coming and they were able to pivot and say, nope, nothing goes to the post, we're going to instead utilize one of the courier companies to ship. And if they had negotiation space, right, to make it still economical to provide that good to their customers, I think they would have fared much better than those who relied heavily on the more inexpensive post situation.
So, on that direct-to-consumer piece, did we see a lot of traditional B2B type companies have to almost skip over parts of their supply chain and try to get product direct to consumers?
Yeah, I think there was a huge there's a huge shift, right? They were watching it sort of, again, it's that car accident thing. It's like, oh my gosh, nothing's moving. How can this be? But how do you react on the second week in December when you've got 2 weeks before people are expecting to see their things? So there's not a lot of flexibility there, but if you were able to switch every single order that you had in the pipe over from post to, let's say, UPS or FedEx in a faster service and still fulfill your customers at a way that was going to keep you in business and not lose money terribly. Those people who had a flexible shipping platform who could turn those orders over, just because your customer paid for post doesn't mean you have to deliver it that way. You can switch on a dime if you have the right tool in place. If you don't, and you have no other shipping platform but post, because that's what is the cheapest for you to do e-com orders for, you're in a really bad place, I think.
And the byproduct of all this is going to be all the returns, right? As things start to arrive late, people are going, I've already got one now, and back they go. So let's start to look at, I think we learned a lot in 2020 about, being nimble, right? Being able to move in the right direction. So from a technology perspective, what do we see organizations putting in place to be able to safeguard this? And why don't we start with you, Chris?
So I think, so one of the things that I think is clear is that we're not going to go back to how we were. So we talked about a huge amount of, all of e-com's a perfect example. E-com was a growing, exploding business anyway. Everybody was trying to get a foot in the door of e-com. It's moved a lot faster, and people, okay, we're going to kind of get excited about being able to go back to stores for a short amount of time. But the reality is, a lot of people who buy things online now are going to continue to do so. And to put that into some context, we saw customers who offered both bricks and mortar, so traditional store-based sales, and e-com, and their e-com channel went up by 500% in kind of over the in the months leading up towards peak, not even just at peak. So I think to go from that into what businesses are doing to ensure that they're preparing for this, is kind of almost taken into all those things that Michelle just mentioned, having to figure out how they build that into their solutions. So again, they've got a core solution, they use that to do a certain number of business processes. What can they do to that in the most effective way to become flexible and make it non-intrusive? So they're not making like wholesale changes to the code or the underlying functionality that they rely on today, but that gives them the flexibility to have 3 carriers over here, but switch to this carrier if needed. 5 suppliers of a certain product range over here, but switch to another supplier if I need to. And also, I think it's really important, and again, wasn't new to 2021, but it's that customer experience. So we just talked about the bad customer experience, and you're not receiving your parcel through the post, but kind of what people are looking for more and more. But from a business perspective, is how do you compete with the Amazon effect? Because competing with Amazon as whatever business you are is going to be a very difficult proposition, because kind of that's their starting point. So what can you do from that? And the way you do it is by having a USP, by making yourself a little bit different, by offering something a little bit special. And from a customer perspective, I think that's kind of what we're all looking for too. So what makes us feel a little bit special? What's different about what this business offers us in terms of deliveries? But you can only do that if you have that flexibility and that kind of ability to make those things available in your system without having a huge impact, in terms of manual processing or extra cost, or the changes, long time-consuming changes to your software or your infrastructure.
Okay, Steve Williamson, would you like to add anything to that?
I'll take a slightly different angle. To Chris's point, I think you're hearing at least the underlining theme for all of us is flexibility, right? You've heard that term, I think, used by everyone so far. If we kind of just expand on that a little bit, when you look at the rate of change, in the rate of keeping up, what used to be, so to speak, a one-off in the past, or hey, I'll just build integration to that supplier, or I'll just build this off. I'm not going to invest in that technology stack that gives me that flexibility to have just someone plug into that. Now that's being reevaluated. That's being looked at to say, geez, if I'm going to invest in Microsoft's ERP, D365 F&O, and I really love this, well, one of the great things about that platform is its rate of update, its rate of change. And if you're using providers and partners and all of these things, that ISVs that go around them, can they keep up? And I think that's really, for me, when I look at 2021 and what's going to separate, technology is going to be one of them, but also strategy. What's your strategy long-term of how you're treating something that you might have done as a one-off integration to an EDI provider? Now you might be thinking, well, is that the right approach bearing what's occurred, right, in 2020? With COVID, with the Amazon effect, with all of these political, social, economic changes, is that the right strategy for me? We used in our opening statements that bicycle guy, right? That bicycle manufacturer is really evaluating himself now and saying, all right, what's the right thing? If I'm going to, again, do this great ERP, but I'm going to do an integration into this custom carrier, as Michelle said, to do my deliveries, well, you've strapped yourself, you've confined yourself. So while you're on one part of your business, you've done great. On the other part of your business, maybe not so good. So those are just, I think, things for companies to think about.
And when they're doing this evaluation, it's right from who's going to host my cloud, right down to which mobile app am I going to use. That's got to be integrated
all the way through. And Jason,
you cannot have siloed technology. So Michelle, over to you, and I want you to maybe talk a little bit about the technology that you've seen coming from the consumer side to B2B, because I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on the supply chain of, traditionally nobody was watching what I'm doing. Now, everybody wants to see what I'm doing.
Yeah, so from a visibility standpoint, if you can't see where your products are going or where your customers can't track that stuff, they're not going to be very happy. They are instant. We've been given the instant gratification wand, and we want it for everything. So having a customer or a supplier who can provide the customer with that up to the minute, oh my gosh, do I reorder my product or is it coming, right? If you have those touch points with your customers and you say, here, it's coming, here's your tracking, here's your update. Everybody's gotten a message, I'm sure, in your email recently where it says, we're very sorry, there's a slight delay, I'm still coming, and I'm going to be here at X time. Who doesn't want to know that, right? And companies who have flexibility in their products to provide those types of touches with their customer makes things way easier. And I think on a little bit of on an international note, you know, how can companies thrive and survive? Well, I think it's important to look at the international market, not just domestically. And I think companies are seeing that more. They're seeing that there's more customer base outside of their normal channels. How do I get there? Well, that can be super scary. If you don't know international trade, you're going to be like, oh, how do I do that? Well, you do that through having companies, having systems that can support all of the requirements sort of incidental to your day. Being able to make sure that a party is not on a restricted party list, that you're okay to export those goods to your customer, that's sort of incidental to you onboarding your customer. Having those checks in place programmatically instead of having to worry about it. And other ways is having systems that just know how to do international trade. They can alert you to a document or a program that needs to be completed so that you can take a look at, hey, not just this piece of business. What happens if I'm, you know, struggling here? I can expand in these other markets, and I can do it successfully because there's sort of a prescribed recipe for how do I enter a market that I haven't before.
Okay, great. Jason, do you want to add anything about, you know, the technology stack going forward?
Yeah, even before talking about the technology stack, I just wanted to add a little something to what Steve, Michelle, Chris have been talking about. So, you know, not only the ability to sort of pivot and change direction if you see that there's something wrong with one carrier, go to another, that kind of thing, but also even within your business. So, you know, we've seen companies where, you know, they ship small parts and really big parts, even with the bike example, right? So if you're shipping out a frame versus shipping out an envelope, you know, paper documents or shipping out stuff. So the ability to cater to all of these different shipment scenarios is also important, right? Because you might use postal for very lightweight and very small, low volume things. And then you're going to use like a specialized carrier for your bike frames. And then you might also decide that you want to use a local carrier if you're, you know, shipping within your own state or something, right? Because they're offering you better rates and stuff like that. So that's also something to consider, which have made, you know, companies that have this kind of platform do better. And the other thing that I guess, Rick, you had mentioned, nobody sort of talked about it, but it's the returns, right? So we're seeing a lot of trends where people want to buy stuff and they want it now, and then they want to buy 3 different sizes because they don't know which one's going to be best, and then they want to ship out the rest because they don't care, and they want it to be free. Nobody wants to pay for all of this stuff, but to have a platform that also allows you to take care of these things, right? That's a business process that you have to deal with, right? If you got to deal with returns by going to a website and then trying to print out a return label and stuff like that, then that's really time consuming for your own operations as well.
You know, my own experience, I ordered 3 shirts from a retailer, and they came 3 different days and 3 different packages, and you know, sort of like, oh, they shorted me. Oh no, here's another one, and the next day the other one came. So it was a little bit confusing from my end. Luckily, they all fit. Okay, so let's wrap up talking about sort of the relationship between BluJay and NMB. You know, you've been working together for quite some time in the Microsoft space, in the F&O space, in the supply chain space. So Michelle, I'm going to let you sort of kick it off about, you know, working together and, you know, the future and what you can do for customers.
Yeah, so I really like to start, I think, just stepping back to sort of how do customers future-proof, right? And I think the rest of the folks on the panel can fill in the bits on NMB and BluJay and what we're doing, but really start with how do you future-proof your supply chain? Three key areas that I feel really, hit home, things you can do right away is map out those potential disruptors. So do you even know where the disruptors are in your supply chain? Where are they hiding, right? We don't want those things to come up again. We've had plenty of experience in the last year dealing with some of them, but have we taken the time to plot those out and figure out where are those disruptions? The next is going to be like to really leverage technology to, create those early warning systems. Like, do you have KPIs that are going to alert you to a potential problem before it happens? You don't know about it. How do you fix them? And how do you stop and pivot, right? How do you have that flexibility, even with the best systems, if you don't know that there's something on the rise, right? And technology and reporting and information really is going to help you kind of fine tune that. And then lastly, sort of ask yourself, what can I do today? What will have a positive impact today on where I want to be in the future, what I want to do in case there's a problem? Can I fix this at a very low cost, and will it give me the returns should there be disruption down the line?
Okay, great. Anything you want to add, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, when we look at the possibilities, Michelle's talking about KPIs. In the Microsoft world, Microsoft's doing a lot of big push around Power Apps and Power BI. And data analytics. So that's a really important topic, and it's something that so today, how do you put the tools in place to better equip your business to handle your business processes? That's really important. But then analyzing the data that you're extracting out of these systems to then take decisions to make your business better, right? So there's a lot coming. We're working a lot with BluJay. NMB and BluJay are working together into so many different initiatives. Some of the interesting things that I can think about, for example, there's a custom report configuration table, and this ties into the ability to ship anywhere in the world and without having to really worry about what kind of documents I need to support this shipment that needs to go, to Korea or that needs to go to Chile. You build out these reports through SSRS, which is Microsoft's platform for reporting, and then you tie it in based on specific conditions that you want this report to automatically print. So that's the kind of things that we're putting in place to support the businesses today. And then Power BI, using the power of Power BI to come up with really intelligent KPIs to help you make better decisions.
I like the term that Michelle used, early warning system, right? So we want to create visibility where we can understand what happened in the past. We want to understand what's going on right now, though, and in real time, so we can pivot to stop it or help it along. And then, we need to be able to forecast the future. So, the more we can see, the better. Steve Williamson, over to you.
I'm going to go back a little bit on one of my statements and expand on it, which was talking about, again, Microsoft's commitment to change, right, in their D365 approach for change, and that importance of having a partnership that gives you that advantage of sticking with that change. And I think that's what BluJay and NMB are really bringing to the table. BluJay's focus is making sure that we stay up to date with the supply chain needs, whether it's a customs need of clearing, an AES for export out of the US, or whether it's a screening, or whether it's produce a UPS label or a bill of lading. That's what we're committed to. And NMB's committed to making sure that continues to work in a seamless way with D365. And on top of that, build what Jason was just alluding to, all these other advantages that you can take within the tool sets of D365. And that's the key. That's the flexibility that you've been hearing. That's the understanding that you've been hearing, is that you're not committing to, build this silo and this is the silo. It's no, you're really thinking about it in a platform perspective, and that it can mold and continue to evolve just as Microsoft's evolved, so that you're not stuck in 1975 or 85 or 95 or 2005, that you can say, all right, Microsoft's got that change, my ISV partner in BluJay, and we think that's unique in the marketplace. We really do. Not that we're solving world hunger, but what we're doing is we're taking small slabs of capabilities and making sure that you can continue to grow within those small slabs. And I'm excited about that for sure.
Okay, great. Chris, I'm going to let you close things off, talk a little bit about the relationship between the two organizations and how you're working on, the right technologies to help your customers.
So I think Steve made a really good point. I think, and the way I'd like to think of it is we kind of give the power of BluJay solutions at kind of the D365 users' fingertips. So that's kind of like the high level kind of shiny statement. But really everything that Steve talked about is what's happening in the background in terms of how we work together, the integration that we put into place. And I think there's three things so we've mentioned these throughout this session today. So we've talked about flexibility, we've talked about scalability, and we've touched a little bit on some security items. And I think from my perspective, I would say, well, through our partnership and through the way that we're delivering our technology, we're trying to take advantage of the tools available to us, and so should the businesses out there. So whether that's flexibility in terms of how the solution is hosted in the cloud, how that gives you scalability, how that allows you to add extra connections, how it allows you to host in different locations, as Jason mentioned. Give yourself that level of flexibility. Scalability, is your business growing? Are you expected to do millions of transactions and ship millions of parcels? Or are you quite small? Or is the fluctuations with different peaks throughout the year? And then really, again, kind of from using BluJay and NMB's expertise, both in terms of how we host, but also with our kind of all the things, as you've seen, I guess, with Michelle from her compliance and kind of background, how important things like security are to us. And I mean that in terms of things like data security and privacy laws and GDPR. And by using the kind of expert suppliers of technology that are out there, you're de-risking that type of thing. So we've talked all day about supply chain and kind of building your business that way. But if you're not taking care of kind of the risk and the dangers to kind of some of the things internally, then you're just as much kind of at risk of things going wrong. So it's probably where I'm finishing.
Great. I want to thank our expert panel for taking time today to talk about this subject. And I'm sure we're going to see a very interesting 2021 and beyond when it comes to supply chain, as our customers start to recover and say, what the heck happened and where are we going from here? So again, thank you very much and have a great day.